Wisconsin Eye's 2014 election coverage is brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice for Wisconsin hospitals, supporting high-quality, high-value care in communities like yours.
Covering the 2014 elections, Wisconsin Eye is in Wausau. We're interviewing Congressman Sean Duffy. He's from Wausau. He's a Republican seeking re-election in the 7th Congressional District. Congressman, welcome back to Wisconsin Eye.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Programming note, Wisconsin Eye.
Welcome to Wausau, too, by the way.
Thank you. Wisconsin Eye appreciates the support of the Wisconsin Hospital Association, which represents more than 139 hospitals and health systems, for making these candidate interviews possible. Let's talk about some timely issues first. Your vote against the $500 million to aid and train the Syrian rebels. Was that a tough vote?
Yeah, I got to tell you, it was. I spent a lot of time, not just agonizing over the vote, but actually getting research, talking to a lot of different people who were supportive and who were opposed to the money. And my concern in the end, and why I voted against it, was the president doesn't have a good track record of picking winners and losers in the Middle East. That he would pick vetted, moderate rebels with the Free Syrian Army, I didn't believe he could do it. You look at what happened in Egypt. He sided with the Muslim Brotherhood. He tried to sell America that this was not a radical group. They were very moderate Muslims. Well, the truth is they were moderate only in respect to they were a little less radical than an ISIS or an Al-Qaeda. And it took 23 million Egyptians rising up and protesting to overthrow the Muslim Brotherhood. He sided with a Muslim Brotherhood-aligned group in Libya. And a lot of the Free Syrian Army that he wants to train and arm are Muslim Brotherhood folks as well. So I don't have a lot of faith that the president is going to get the right people. And then my concern, too, is that he's not shown the right, I think, the right passion to eradicate the threat. I think most people understand this is a threat to the Middle East, and it's also a threat to America. And he gave a 14-minute speech where he was talking about this effort where he's going to bomb ISIS. But then he spent days talking about what he wouldn't do. And I think if you're going to address a threat like ISIS, you should put all options on the table. No one wants to put American boots on the ground. But I think you do a service to your enemy when you tell them what you won't do and what they can expect your lines of warfare to be. And I think that's a wrong way to do it. And frankly, I think he was doing this not because of a passion to defeat ISIS because they're a threat to us. I think he did it more because of political reasons. And that's my concern.
When I interviewed Reed Ribble, he has a real fear that we will see, to use the common term, American boots on the ground there within a matter of months or a year. Do you have that same concern, Congressman?
Listen, my concern is if we don't act appropriately today and ISIS continues to expand and grow, you will be sure to send young men and women into harm's way, into battle. I think that's a foregone conclusion unless we get it right now. I think we could have looked back a year ago and we could have addressed ISIS in its infancy. We could have gone into the summer and taken out, as they had all of our tanks that they had acquired and our trucks and our guns as they were lined up in the desert going into Mosul, we could have bombed and taken them out there. I do think we want to see other states in the region partner and put their boots on the ground, but I do think you're going to need some special forces guys involved. And frankly, we already do have boots on the ground. Yeah. But we want some guys that have the knowledge and the experience to make sure we can be effective. And frankly, I think it sends the right message to the Middle East partner states that we're in this for the long haul to help them and us defeat this rising threat. And I think if you say what you won't do, I think people go, well, these guys aren't committed.
Speaker Boehner said he was willing to bring the House back for a vote on a formal declaration of war. Do you think it should come to that? And if so, how do you think you'd vote on that?
Well, I think it could come to that. But the way the process usually works is the president asks for a declaration of war. He asks the Congress. And one of the issues here is the president doesn't seem to want to ask, and then we're in the unique position of going, well, he's going to war and maybe we should just give him the authority even though he hasn't asked for it. We should go through the proper channels. So the president should ask us for the authority and what authority he seeks, and then we should vote on it. That's the way the history of this country has worked, and I think that's how we should address this crisis as well. Am I willing to go back and vote on it? Absolutely. Go tomorrow. Go today.
Would you vote for it?
It depends on what the resolution is, but more than likely, yeah. I want to see us defeat this threat.
Okay.
But yeah, you're asking me to vote on something that I haven't seen.
I understand that. I understand.
So.
Domestic issues. What's been the impact of the Affordable Care Act on the 7th District?
Health care has changed in the sense that prices have gone up, deductibles have increased, so it's made it harder for people to afford health care. Choices in the Affordable Care Act in some of our rural counties, there's only one option. You don't have a whole slew of options in some of our rural counties. That's been a problem. We've seen a push for part-time work as opposed to full-time work, as that's incentivized in the Affordable Care Act. There's the Cadillac tax. So we have some unions in our area that get really good health care, and their employers are going to be forced to, if they keep that health care up, pay a significant tax. Mm-hmm. And that tax is a few years away, but then the contracts that are being negotiated are happening today. And so I think you're going to see those unions who've negotiated good contracts for health care are going to see their employers go, we can't provide those anymore because we can't afford to pay the taxes. So the promises that it was going to create more jobs and drive down the cost of health care and you're going to have a whole bunch of options hasn't come to pass in the 7th District. You have some people who have been helped by it, and I hear from those people. But I hear from people who have very serious health issues that are now getting kicked off of their health care provider and their doctor and forced into a new system that some don't have the skill set to deal with the problems that they face.
How does the future of the Affordable Health Care Act change if your party takes over the Senate, or doesn't it change? Because obviously President Obama is still going to be president through 2016.
We won't have a veto-proof majority in the House and the Senate, so I'm sure the president's not going to sign a repeal of his signature law. But I do think there's certain aspects of the Affordable Care Act that their repeal is more popular with the American people, and the president might be willing to step in and join us fixing some of these real problems that the law faces. As you know, since we've taken control of the House and sent bills to the Senate to fix the Affordable Care Act, Harry Reid hasn't allowed those to come up for a vote, and so the president hasn't actually seen those bills in his desk to sign or veto. I think we're going to be able to give them that chance should we take the Senate.
What's at stake for the 7th District if your party takes control of the Senate, or just in general in the November 4 elections?
You still have a divided government, but I think when I look at the debt, that's still a big issue for me. And
I looked it up today, $17.8 trillion.
$17.8 trillion, and we're on a pathway to a debt crisis, and we have to start to make structural reforms to the way we do business to address it. And part of that is our budget, and part of that is our appropriations bills. I think we'll be able to work with our colleagues in the Senate to get a budget that's going to work and get us on this pathway to balance, and actually go through the appropriations process. We do appropriations bills in the House, but the Senate doesn't even try to do appropriations bills. I think we can get this process to start to work again and actually put these bills on the president's desk. I think we're going to put the Keystone Pipeline on the president's desk, better energy exploration on the president's desk, regulatory reform. I'm not a guy who says we shouldn't have any regulation, any rules. We need rules and regulation, but they become so burdensome. We're going to start to push some of those back and give the president a choice whether he wants to join us on some common sense reform to the way our government works.
Congress's approval rating, I think, is between 8%, 10%, 12%. Does your party share much of the blame for that?
Listen, I think people are frustrated with a lack of action in Washington. And so, yeah, when you have partisanship, I think everybody suffers. But if you look at my district, I think I've done well because I'm a guy who's willing to work across party lines, a guy who's willing to take good ideas no matter where they come from and fight for them. In financial services, the bills that I think I have the best chance of success with, I try to find Democrat partners, and early on we work on their concerns, so we have a better shot of taking that House bill and getting it brought up in the Senate because it's a Democrat-controlled Senate. But I think America wants their government to work, But I will say this: what you see in Washington with the partisanship, right, and no doubt it's there, I think you also see a divide in the country as well. I mean, I think you see, different states in different congressional districts in different cities. Some are far left and some are far right, and you're seeing their representatives bringing those far left and far right views to Congress, and they're fighting. But I think, I also think this is where we're debating important issues, and that debate is important, and coming up with good solutions from that debate is necessary. So.
Talk about your service on financial services. Recently, we've seen some amazing numbers in terms of hacking of some of these private. J.P. Morgan, Home Depot, Target. Is there anything Financial Services Committee can do to fight this problem, Congressman?
Yeah, well, I think that we will start to look in financial services at whether we have a role in making sure we're protecting the American consumer, and making sure we know who has the responsibility when these banks or these merchants are hacked. I would have liked to have seen the sector, the banking and the merchants, work this out themselves. I think the private sector will come up with better solutions and more timely solutions. But I think there's ways we in Congress can put pressure on them through liability for when these hacks happen, that will incentivize them to actually work through solutions that protect people from the hackers and protect their data.
You mentioned the national debt of $17.8 trillion, but we're still on track for Medicare and Social Security to go bankrupt. Have they been pushed off of the computer screen of Congress by these international crises, sir?
Well, listen, I think that everything is, there's just more crises in the world. But listen, we're still concerned about Medicare, and we're still concerned about Social Security. And we think that there has to be some reform for the next generation of retirees. We want to make sure everyone who is in the retirement or near the retirement gets the plan that's there today. But if we make some structural changes to the next generation of retirees, we save the program and make it solvent. And we have to have that conversation. And some who say we don't have to change the program for this next generation, they're living in la-la land. It doesn't work. I mean, it's going bankrupt. Everybody agrees. The president has even said that it's going bankrupt. So I think it's incumbent upon us to find solutions that everyone can buy into. In our budget, we put out a solution that we thought would work. But I know that just like with the Affordable Care Act, if you don't get both sides to reform health care, it becomes a really partisan issue and people don't buy in. Same thing will be with Medicare. We're going to have both sides come to the table with their ideas to fix it and make it solvent. And if we do that, I think the program is going to be preserved, and we're going to meet the promise to all of our seniors today and in the future.
Every speech President Obama gives, he calls on people like you to vote to raise the minimum wage. Your response?
Well, first of all, I look at where we're at with the minimum wage and the cost it's going to bring to jobs in our economy. The studies have been pretty clear, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of jobs. But I want to see people make better wages, and I want them to move from low-income wages into better wages with better opportunity. The question is, how do we do that? And my concern with what the president says and with what some in the Democrat Party will say is they're like, listen, what we want to do is we want to raise the minimum wage, and to that employer we also want to raise their taxes. And we have this green movement that's actually going to raise their energy costs. And we want more rules and more regulations, so they're going to have to spend more money on compliance. And oh, by the way, we want them to expand and grow and create more jobs. I mean, you can't say we want them to spend all of this money and think there's going to be job growth. It's one thing to say, listen, let's raise the minimum wage, but let's actually reduce their taxes. Or let's work on an energy policy that will reduce the cost of energy. Or let's limit the burden on our small manufacturers on the regulatory side so they can actually afford to pay better wages. But I also think what's important is I worked at the IGA in Hayward for minimum wage, $3.15 or $3.25 an hour when I was 15 years old. I learned good skills. And I took those skills and was able to go on to another better paying job doing lumberjack shows. Most people have a story of working for minimum wage, and that's not where they stay. They're able to get the skill set that shows them how to show up on time and shows them how to work and shows them the work ethic and follow the direction of their boss, and they take those skills and get moving up the economic ladder. There's some people who get caught though in minimum wage who are hard working and want to get moving up the ladder. Well, I think the problem is we don't have better job growth in these middle income salaries, middle income jobs, and I think that's the focus. How do you grow the economy to have more opportunities so people can start moving up that economic ladder? But I want to see more better paying jobs for more people that support our families. But I don't think you can do it in a way that says, yep, we're going to raise minimum wage, we're going to raise taxes, we're going to raise energy costs and raise all these other costs, and you're going to start tanking small businesses. And we have small businesses here. That's who we employ. And it's a philosophy that says we want to raise the minimum wage on jobs that no longer exist.
You're not saying the current minimum wage is too high, though, and should be lowered, are you?
No, I'm not saying that at all.
No, I just wanted to clarify.
No, but also, I'm maybe going to bring the mine up. I was going to bring the mine up in this
conversation.
I was
going to bring the mine up next because
great, because we're on the same page.
We're coming from the Capitol, and that mine is still debated, and the mine may now not mine in Ashland County. So go ahead.
Yeah,
when you're asked about the mine, do you think it's ever going to be built, sir?
Good paying jobs, right? We want to talk about good paying jobs. The mine is $60,000 to $80,000 a year.
Do you think it'll ever be built?
$60,000 to $80,000 a year. So people who come and say, I want good paying jobs. I'm not talking about good paying jobs at Walmart, bringing someone from minimum wage to $10 an hour. These are $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 a year jobs, really good paying. I want to see the studies. I lived up in Ashland. That's my home. I love the lake. I love the outdoors. I went and toured the proposed mine site. Mm-hmm. If we can do it safely, let's do it. These are great jobs. If you're gonna harm the Great Lakes and our great trout streams, let's not do it. But I want to wait and see the data. And I think the DNR is going to do a good job with the studies, and we'll be able to look at it and decide from there.
The Corps of Engineers weighs in, and the Bad River weighs in. And
guess what? When I went and toured up there, guess what they had? Old mine shafts. They used to mine up there. They'd explored different mining opportunities in this area. What do we have in our flag? A miner. Where do you get the name the Badgers? We have a history in Wisconsin of mining. If we can do it safe, let's do it. And let's put people to work up there. I'm sick of people talking about, I support good paying jobs, except these good paying jobs. I look at our forestry industry. They're shutting down the national forest. We don't have loggers who are in the woods.
I wanted to ask you about that. How far along is that? Is that a definite rule? They are shutting down the national forest?
Well, they're not telling us that, but they're not the allowable sustainable cut. They're not even. They're
shrinking.
They're cutting. No, they're not even cutting it. They're cutting half of that number. So
why?
Well, they'll tell us they don't have funding. There's lawsuits. They'll give you every reason in the book as to why they're not cutting it. But the bottom line is they're not cutting it. And so that means there's less loggers in the woods. There's less wood that's going into our mills that come from Wisconsin. We have train loads of wood that come from Canada. Come on, this is a natural resource that's renewable, that we weren't great when we first cut it at the turn of the last century.
Right, because we
could have
cut it all.
We did. But we've learned from that, and we know how to manage our forests. And if you look at my district, these are good paying jobs in rural Wisconsin, and they're getting taken away. And when we talk about renewable resources, this is one of them. And if you ask someone to walk through, who doesn't know, they're not a forester, bring them out from San Francisco and say, well, I'm going to walk you through 240s. One that was managed, we won't tell them which is which, but one that's managed and one that's unmanaged. Mm-hmm. Which one do you like better? They'll pick the managed one. It looks better, it's prettier. And you know what, it's a great economic driver for our area. And I get frustrated when I have bureaucrats in Washington, and even in our state, that are shutting down our forests and shutting down our way of life. You want good paying jobs? Open up the forest. Let's log it, it's renewable, and let's do it in a sustainable, healthy way.
How are you fighting that, and have you had much success fighting it?
So I've introduced a number of different bills, trying to push the Forest Service along. One of them is I've said, hey, we need to require the Forest Service to cut the allowable sustainable cut. Get to that number. You've said that's a sustainable number. Now cut it. What agency has sales of timber and loses money on it? That they don't have enough money for the timber sales? They make money off the timber sales.
Meanwhile, you saw that recent story that experienced loggers are going to work industry South Dakota, Wyoming out there. Yeah, there was a recent news story.
Yeah.
Maybe you didn't see
I didn't see that.
Okay.
Do you think? But do you think they want to go out there? Or do you think they'd rather live in Wisconsin alone?
If they're Wisconsin natives, they may want to stay with their...
I bet they want to stay in Wisconsin with their families right there. They don't want to pick up and leave their kids at home with their wives and go get a job in North Dakota. They'd rather stay here. But they can, and I think that's one of the points. Let's keep those jobs in Wisconsin.
You mentioned your love of the lake. Are you worried about invasive species?
Absolutely. Horribly.
So are we making any progress fighting that, or is
we're making progress. I think that they continue to advance invasive species. But, are we working on holding them back? Absolutely. But I'm the co-chair of the Great Lakes Task Force. Fought for GLRI funding, making sure we protect the lakes. Mm-hmm. It's an important aspect of who I am, and what I want to do in Congress is make sure it's a great economic driver, but we're preserving and protecting that lake as well. And I'm concerned about Asian carp, and I think the carp are making advancements, and we let them in the lake. I think it's going to be devastating for the ecosystem.
Transportation funding. You have a huge district. It relies on roads to get the fish from Lake Superior and the logs and everything. Yet pension smoothing is not a long-term option. What's a way to permanently pay for transportation?
So what's happening here, right, is we have a lot of money that goes to maybe our social programs, and that leaves less money to build roads and bridges. And that pressure is going to continue. So, listen, we need long-term funding for our infrastructure. The longer you wait, the more expensive it's going to get, and you got to have a first-class infrastructure in America. What we've talked about is if all this other money is going to the social side, do we say let's expand leases, energy leases on American federally owned land, and use that energy lease money to drive into infrastructure? A ton of money. That would be a great resource for us. The president said no to that, but I think we got to find creative ways to fund it. And you just can't start raiding pots of money and think that's a long-term solution, because it's not.
Congressman Sensenbrenner yesterday suggested let's get rid of the federal gas tax and let the states charge it. Have you heard that idea, or is that a new one?
I have not. But yeah, listen, I give them more authority to the states.
Yeah,
I'm fine with.
Yeah. Okay. Corporate inversions, should they be stopped?
They should be stopped by way of reforming our tax code. I mean, I think it's crazy that people would look at inversions and go, I'm here to punish those who go to a different country because of better taxes, as opposed to going, maybe we should fix our tax rates, and make America competitive again, where we don't have countries that want to leave America. We want countries to actually come and set up shop in America, that has the best capital structure, that has the best workforce, the smartest workforce. This should be the home for all these companies, and that our tax system is driving them out, that we're not talking about reforming the tax code, and instead you're talking about punishing businesses, I think is missing the point here. It's like California. California has really high taxes, and what's happening in California? Businesses are leaving. They're going to places like Texas. It's like California saying, oh, we're going to try to punish our businesses that leave California and go to Texas. If California wants to stop it, California's beautiful. Fix your tax code in the state, and you're going to get those businesses to stay, and probably some to actually come back to California. So it's tax reform that's going to fix this problem, not trying to punish businesses that leave because of a dysfunctional tax code.
The differences between the Obama White House and your party on immigration, do you see any progress on that in the next Congress, sir?
Well, I got to tell you, I think there's a lot of things that we agree on immigration reform that has to happen. The first thing that we need to do is secure the border. And we see the threat, whether it's from Ebola, ISIS, terrorists, the issue with thinking that there's an open border and kids can come over and across it, and little kids that are sent on a horrible, dangerous journey, being raped, murdered, abused. I think we secure the border, and I think we can find agreement on what do you do with folks who are here. Not giving citizenship, but offering some form of a legal status that they can't vote, they can't tap into the entitlement system.
Less than citizenship.
Less than citizenship. If they want to apply to become a citizen, they can get to the back of the line and they can apply, but you don't jump to the front of the line. But you also, if you haven't committed any other crimes, but being here without documentation, we can find a way for you to have some form of a status. But I look at the president and his conversation about using some executive order to give some form of blanket amnesty. I think that's politics to the core, because if you really want to solve this problem, an executive order doesn't resolve immigration and the dysfunction in our immigration system. Actual congressional action with the president signing a bill will reform that system. And I think the president is then short-sighted in playing politics. Obviously, they did Dodd-Frank, they did Obamacare. Why didn't they do immigration reform? Okay. Why didn't they do minimum wage? All these issues that they think are so great now, why weren't they doing them? I think they do them today play with them today because of politics.
The president's use of orders is why your party is sued him, right?
Abuse of powers?
Yeah, the abuse of powers.
Yeah.
Well, you're in a unique position to answer this question. How can your party attract more Hispanic voters in 2016?
Well, I think if you look at the Hispanic voter, do they believe in upward mobility? Do they believe in the American dream? Do they believe in entrepreneurship? Do they believe in choice in education? Do they believe in families? They believe in a lot of the same things that the Republican Party believes in. Sometimes, I know we're taking this as a whole, I'm generalizing here, and sometimes if you look at studies, they might like a little more government than we like. But beyond a little more government, all these other aspects, hard work and upward mobility, choice in education, they side with us. They're on the same page. One of the problems that we face, though, is some people in our party say things that will lead the Hispanic community to think that we don't like them. And you don't vote for people that you think don't like you. And that's just a few people that say these things that I think turn folks off. But if you look at guys that have been working on immigration reform, Paul Ryan, Marco Rubio, party leaders that are trying to get that part of these issues right, but then also the economic growth side. I think one of the best issues, if you care about people and you care about kids, you want to make sure they have a good education. And you have the Republican Party that says that you can look at a zip code of where a Hispanic child lives, and you can know whether they're going to be poor or middle-class Americans when they grow up, just by their zip code because of the education that they're going to get. And Democrats will say, that's right, and we want to keep them in failing schools if those schools are failing. And we say, you know what? Those parents of those children should decide, give them the opportunity to go to a better school. Give those kids an opportunity of a good education so they can make it to the middle class, just like those Democrats who send their kids to private schools themselves. Give those Hispanic kids that same right, because they understand that the best way to the middle class is through a good education. And that's us who is fighting for their ability to get out of the poor schools into better schools.
Well, we're talking about schools. Are you asked about Common Core? I know it's a state-by-state issue, but you must be asked on it.
Yeah, it's more of a state issue.
I understand. Do you get any questions on Common Core? Do you agree with them?
It is a state issue. I like state control. I like local control. I don't want the federal government telling our Wausau community or our Hayward community or Ashland community what's right for us. I trust the parents who send their kids into these schools. I trust our local school boards to reflect the values and morals of our community. And it is true. You get some of these math papers back from my kids who are starting to work on Common Core, and I'm like,
scary.
Well, I'm like, what is this?
Yeah.
Well, it's an odd way of teaching sometimes.
It's a different way than you and I had back
It truly is, and so I'm like,
in sixth grade.
I can't help you in fifth grade math. I don't get what they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? We have had a great education system that's educated the brightest minds in the world. That's had the most amazing innovation, the most amazing scientific and technological advancements in the world. We're cashing that in for something else. Let's look at what's worked for us and tap back into that. And our families and our communities are the ones that have driven that great education.
Campaign finance reform, in light of Citizens United, which is ruled, that decision came out years ago, and now the McCutcheon ruling, there doesn't seem to be any rules in terms of all the third-party groups. There's less disclosure of who gives. Mm-hmm. Are you advocating any change on campaign finance reform?
I would say this. I think that we need to have campaign finance reform. But if we do it, it has to be done in a way that addresses everybody's money. Because what you'll say, one side will say, well, you have a funding source over here, that's really bad, let's take it away. But let's keep my funding source over here.
Right.
We should take it all away. I think money in politics has become very challenging. I think if you ask the electorate, even in Wisconsin today, they are absolutely sick of ads and negative ads. And they just turn the channel now. It's just been they've been so overplayed. And I look at, oftentimes some of the Democrats will say, well, Republicans and Koch brothers, and listen, if you look at the top funders, Republican and Democrat, of where the money comes from, Democrats have far more of that money. Harry Reid's PAC is the biggest political action PAC out there, driving money into the Senate races. If you ask the Senate challengers in the Senate races, the big ones that are being followed nationally, the Democrats have spent far more money on outside dollars in these races than Republicans. So I think it's incumbent upon everybody to say, how do we get some of this money out? I deal with, you just get elected, and all of a sudden you have the election's now 2 years away, and there's ads running against you again. It's like, let's have a break in the political ads. Let's get something done, and then there'll be a time for a political season. And if there's so much money, the ads they never stop.
But you're not saying let's have a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. You're comfortable with that? I
think we should deal with it congressionally. Yeah.
Okay. We've exhausted. We've been through a lot of subjects. Do you want to highlight any differences between you and your opponent on November 4?
Well, listen, I'm one who believes in the private sector. I believe that economic growth comes from our small businesses that employ our families and give families more opportunity. And I've seen the role of government as it expands and becomes more influential. It has a harder impact on us in my district. And the reason is, if you're a district where you have big corporations can navigate government really effectively. They have economies of scale. But if you have a small manufacturer, a small business, whether you have 10 or 100 employees, it makes it far more difficult to navigate all the rules and regulation. So I think we have a difference in wanting to scale those rules back. I believe in American energy. I think we should be American energy independent. And that's American jobs, that's American taxes. And if you reduce the cost of energy, because we're using an American energy supply, our manufacturers, which we have a lot in my district, our farmers, we drive those costs down, and that means there's more ability to pay higher wages. But we have a lot of people who think that we can just shut off energy. Or if we're not going to use American energy, we prefer to send our American dollars over to countries that don't like us very much. I want to keep those dollars here and those jobs here. We have a difference there.
Quick follow-up on energy. The draft EPA rule, they want a 30% reduction in coal emissions by 2030. Do you support that?
No. You want to know why? Do you know how much money people spend on energy in my district? Middle-class families. Some studies will say 25%. You start increasing, you're going to increase the cost of energy for middle-class families in our community, and they can't afford to pay higher energy costs. And if you ask the energy companies, they're going to go, listen, we're going to do it, but the costs are going to get passed on to the end consumer. We're utilities; they're going to pass it on, and you start increasing those costs. People can't afford to pay it. So it's great. We want to keep pushing to make sure we do things more cleanly, more environmentally friendly. But if you push things incredibly far, you're going to drive costs up to a point where it makes it really painful for people to heat their homes and put gas in their car.
Very good. Congressman Sean Duffy, Republican seeking re-election in the 7th Congressional District. Thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Thank you.